can you talk about this sort of, I mean, you've lived in the UK. Um, I'm talking to you from the United States. We don't have a culture that has any kind of appreciation or consideration of the kind of like spirituality on a level that is going on where you are right now. It's hard to imagine. I've heard descriptions about the shrines, about the offerings,
Mm.
about that this is just so commonplace. It's not even hidden or even considered at all out of place or odd in
Well, it
any way.
depends. That actually depends on which direction you're looking at. There are
Yeah.
people who are actively trying to stop this.
Oh, is that right?
Oh yeah, yeah. The Buddhism here has changed. It's become slightly more like a religion
Hmm.
in some respects, where instead of the philosophy, the beautiful philosophy it is. And I was going to get to the point that I missed actually, whereby everything just got too much here. It became too open, you know? It just became crazy. When I first started looking at stuff, one of the first items I looked at was a baby's arm, a fetus's arm in oil. Yeah. That's not a great way to win friends, to be honest with you. That's not going to go down well in the long run. I mean, it was a magnificent piece of magic made by a monk who is one of my favorite, will always be one of my favorite magicians of all time. But there's only so far you can go with these things without creating the need for a backlash or the space for a backlash to come
Yeah.
against some of the more raw elements of this. And we are still working our way through that.
Okay.
And I am very close to two or three ajahns, and we are working with them. And we're in a very strange decade, Greg, because everything has to change. And because of that, this has to change as well.
Yeah.
And it's turning out that with having an outside perspective, I might be able to help them do it because they didn't even know magic existed outside Thailand.
Hmm. Fascinating.
Yeah. So it's turning out that way, and we have to rewrite this so as it is accepted in a different way in the world at large as well. And that is a process we're undergoing now, whereby it will be presented in a totally different manner. And I'm working particularly with one Ajahn who can view his own knowledge from a direction that is useful to people outside the country.
Hmm.
Okay. That is why Thai Occult 3 was written, because it is a new perspective on the magic itself coming from one Ajahn who is a young man and incredibly intelligent. So, as part of Thai Occult 1 tells the story of all the things you might not want to know about. Thai Occult 2 tells the variation within the country itself. It is that deep and that prevalent that each city and each region has its own variations of the magic, which is just phenomenal. But then we had to look at one magician to finish this story at this time to see how we could get a deeper appreciation that we can then transfer to everything else. Yeah. Now, originally, after doing Thai Occult 1 and talking to Gordon from Rune Soup,
Hmm.
he was waiting for me to do Thai Occult 1 because he thought that this system could help the world by offering advice on how to repair magic that is in countries that has been lost, or repair magic that has lost certain aspects to it, because most Witcher here does not have the key with it. The key to the knowledge is passed on orally, as is the training. So I think, you're talking when you're saying in the States that things are missing, the one thing that is not missing in the States is people of talent. Some people are born with a natural talent for magic that can be perceived through their
Mhm.
astrology, and you can even adapt their astrology to increase that natural talent for magic. What is missing then is a structure to be able to start to understand what is there, but then also from that, what is missing. And I believe that steps can be taken that can help supplant what is missing in all cultures with magic, but it's going to take one or two or three generations to do it.
Hmm. Would you
Now,
take?
that also involves the difficulty in Western thinking of lineage magic, because we're naturally self contained people. We don't tend to, I don't work that well in groups. We're not good. Many of us are not good at lineage magic, and this is lineage magic to its nth degree, because even the Lursi that they praise here are the original Ajans. They can be seen as the original magicians
Hmm.
for the forms of magic that they represent. So that goes back 2 to 3,000 years for a start off.
Yeah.
But there must be a conversation, in my opinion, whereby actions can be taken and things understood by people of equal talent. Because if you have magic in your life, in yourself, in your astrology, that can be honed and increased throughout your lifetime, and that knowledge can be passed on to other people. It's already occurring.
Yeah.
And then you can look at what is needed.
Yeah. It's a really interesting idea, I think. I mean, from my own perspective, having practiced Western magic and now practicing Vajrayana, it's yeah, there's ways to increase the sort of like efficacy, power, connection, and it does require like training and discipline and
Mhm.
submission to someone that actually knows how to do it, I think. But it is
And
like
that's difficult, isn't it, for a lot of us?
it's difficult. Like, is there anything more difficult? Like, I don't actually know if there is. I mean, if I'm honest with you, like, it's the most difficult thing I've ever done. But
Mm.
it's also seems on some level one of them, or if not the most worthwhile thing, because there are actual results. Like, it does work. So,
Yeah.
yeah, if you want real results, you've got to go where it takes to get them, I think.
That's the reason why I decided to do Thai Occult 3. And I'll send you a copy actually, because I think you'd find it interesting.
Thank you.
Um, I needed to ask the questions of Ajahn Apichai that can help us and help people studying or practicing magic in other regions, because I think there's certain questions that we need to know the answer to as a beginning. Yeah, because I can only ask the questions that I
Mhm.
understand to be
Yeah,
able to ask.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, That includes things like our relationship to our ego, dreams,
Yeah.
astral travel. We need to understand an opinion on that. Now, the
Yeah.
other thing I've come to kind of see is that an opinion on something is not necessarily the way that you need to do it.
Right.
There was a conversation recently with my very good friend Calvin about going into trance.
Hmm.
Yeah. Now, in the Thai Satyan system, you often get people being possessed by their tattoos. The first thing, especially at a place like Wat Bang Prat, which is the great Satyan temple close to Bangkok in Nakhon Pathom, and the Wai crew there is just chaos. It's brilliant. There's people flying around. There's tigers, Lurcy walking slowly. The lot is just carnage, or it was 20 years ago. Come north, and the Ajahns just say, control yourself a bit, just use your samadhi, use your focus, and get to being in the correct form. Don't let the spirits take you. Yeah.
Hmm.
Because then you're being controlled by them. It translates directly in the Thai from being ridden,
Right.
a spirit riding you. Now, there are many forms of magic whereby people come possessed by the spirits.
Yeah.
Okay, so we had a conversation recently because I went to a really old festival here. It took me 2 visits to get to the bottom of it and get the right photographs to be able to present it, which is about two very powerful giants that used to live in a cave under Wat Doi Kam near to Chiang Mai. Wat Doi Kam is older than Chiang Mai, and they built it there to control that cave because caves here can be incredibly dangerous, spirit-wise,
Yeah.
and you'll be kept in there forever as a spirit if you die in there. And they had two giants that were being problematic, and after an agreement with the Buddha, they started to behave themselves. But every year they have to sacrifice a buffalo and offer it to them for the protection of the area from their spirits.
Hmm.
Now, you do not get offerings of beef here because it's too strong. Spiritually, it's too strong.
Yeah.
All the Ajahns offer pork, because
Yeah.
it's actually also the closest to man. So they're offering
Right.
themselves. Yeah. And it's the same with a coconut in the Burmese system. When you offer a coconut, you're offering your head, and the coconut will sit on bananas, green bananas. So you're like offering your head with your
Hmm.
hands. And in this particular festival, they have two mediums, and you never know which will become possessed because it only takes one of them to do this job, either Puse or Yase, so grandmother or grandfather say. And this year it was grandfather say, and once he's actually sat there riding the buffalo with its horns and making all
Hmm.
sorts of wonderful, strange noises and being totally possessed and in him, he walks around the people answering questions, and they all give him a tip with money
Hmm.
because they want to they might need something from some form of knowledge from an ancient spirit,
Yeah.
even though it might just be the lottery numbers that week, yeah, which is very typically Thai. So when talking to my friend Calvin, because he's part of a voodoo system, Asian voodoo, whereby possessions are quite common, um, I'm convinced that both ways are correct. It depends on the training and it depends on the culture, because the culture has to be correct as well, because the culture here and in places like Haiti are part of the power of the system.
Hmm.
So I think whatever occurs here, it's not the definite truth. It is an idea of the truth of the magic of the world. But I think sometimes we need that idea to be able to start somewhere. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because it reminds me of what my teacher always says when we're talking about magic or meditation or whatever the case may be.
Mm.
He's like these aren't, this isn't a description of truth. These are just methods by which you practice, and thereby with some grace you will discover truth. but
Mm.
but this is not truth itself, because truth can't be spoken of in
Mm.
words. He's like, these are just methods. So
Perfect. Yeah.
yeah, it makes
Yeah.
perfect
Perfect.
sense.
Yeah. It's another thing we were discussing actually about with Ajahn Apichai in the book three was the ways to build our energy within, our power within ourselves,
Yeah.
and the ways also to pass it on to something.
Hmm.
Now, one of the having photographed all this for like 8 years now, everything he described about the way to pass it on, I already had a photograph of him doing that in my catalogue of images.
Wow.
And
Interesting.
so every way he describes something, often, oh, that 7-year-old photograph is that. So it was like catching up with things I hadn't seen
Yeah.
consciously.
Right.
And I don't even think we're a quarter of the way there, to be honest with you.
Oh,
I don't think that we're anywhere near past the halfway mark because we still don't know exactly what they can do because
okay.
they don't view the knowledge within themselves in the way that we perhaps do. They can only access the knowledge to do something by request.
So let me just try to, I guess, understand what you're saying by speaking my interpretation of it based on my own understanding of something that I know more about, I guess. There's so okay, I guess, sort of like characterizing it, the magic that's taking place, the magician is, they're not simply someone who's practicing magic. They're like a serious spiritual practitioner
Yeah.
to a level where they're like devoted their life to it,
Yes.
right? And much of their understanding and knowledge of it is highly arcane and not recorded anywhere in writing.
Yep. You might have a description of what it is, but you are not given the keys.
Yeah.
That's the oral transcript. So each magician, each lineage, each generation of magician writes, produces their own Damra books. They
Right.
have to copy it and produce it.
Yeah.
Now, because we are in a tumultuous decade, Ajahn Apichai has already written his Damra books and converted the language from an ancient Thai to modern Thai. So if something happens to him, the
Mm.
magic won't be lost because it's his responsibility. He is part of that stream of magic.
Hmm.
And I think he's only really half in this world, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that, I guess that's my next point, is like you mentioned, they take refuge. And so basically the refuge is basically taking refuge in, well, I mean, I don't know at what like sort of view of Buddhism they take, but to me, when I hear that, to me that's like you're taking refuge in nothingness, really.
Yeah.
And by extension, like, so then it makes sense to me, because then you're talking about like an understanding of wisdom that is comes out of nothing.
Yeah,
And so there's like an understanding that mind is also like that the they might not say it this way, but like the divine is like nothing, and mind in its purity is also this same nothing. And so it makes sense when you say like there's not this sort of intentionality. It's just that this magic sort of manifests, or the knowledge sort of, or the understanding or whatever manifests, and it's arising in accord with the needs of beings, as I think my teacher
that's
would
it.
say.
Yes, it's sitting with people like Ajahn Suh. Ajahn Suh comes from a really ancient lineage. And it's so ancient and so difficult, we don't think he's going to be able to pass it on because people just can't do it. Yeah. He could be, that's why he's kind of treasured, this
Mm-hmm.
particular Ajahn. Ajahn can, you know, he is like a universe within that is quiet just by sitting with him. Yeah. But they all kind of have that ability. Some of them are more able to express in a modern way, or return to a modern time with the way they express themselves or live, but their feet are still within nothingness.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in that nothingness, they can feel everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and they choose nothingness to be able to feel. And that is really not only the foundation of Buddhism, I'll stick my neck out and say that's probably the foundation of the shamanism that used to exist here. What we call the Morpi, the ghost doctors
Mm-hmm.
of old, which don't exist anymore. Um, and by sitting in that nothingness, they cannot put forward any new form of idea towards what magic people might need, because they don't actually know themselves what they have, because they're sat in nothingness. All that is in a book, in a library in their head. Yeah? And this is where Ajahn Dui and Ajahn Apichai come in handy, because they're both young. So particularly Ajahn Apichai can view the magic he holds from almost like it's from above, or like it is on a shelf. So if I'll ask a question like, "Can you do this form of magic?" He'll just go, "Actually, yeah, but
Mm-hmm.
I've never done it before," because he has studied constantly since he was 11. He became a novice monk at 11, and he was tapping corpse oil at the age of 12 just to try it, which involves burning under a chin and using a candle under the breast of a dead pregnant lady. And at 12, most people are just getting an Xbox, you know.
Yeah.
So he's about 35 now. So 23 years, he has done nothing but study magic from the finest sources he can. And those sources tend to accept him immediately because of his astrology.
Mm-hmm.
His current master, who Ajahn was seeking a master of for 10 years because of his knowledge he held, is from the lineage of Luang Pusuk. And he's 84, is Luang Pochuruai, still working, still doing magic, and he's a monk all his life. And Ajahn wanted it because of the way they use the elements within that lineage only. It's very complicated and very unusual way to create magic. And that's why he has such a responsibility to preserve this, because there are not many people who have the full knowledge now. And he is holding something that can change the lives of many. And because of that, he now can basically make magic from, say, a kata said by a monk. He can turn that now into magic. He can bless things as if the original maker of that magic blessed them.
Mm-hmm.
He can create images within an amulet that is the same as what you expect to see in that amulet. Like he did a Baphomet amulet way back, and people who are close to Baphomet just said he's in there.
Mm.
When in fact, what's in there, and he explains how he did this in Thai Occult 3, is a magic for a demon from the lower realms that's become a deity. Yeah. And with the image of Baphomet fulfilling the same magic that Baphomet should fulfill. So while I shouldn't be giving these away, by the way, but while it is still perceived as a Baphomet, it is Thai occultism, because he sees everything as a world of magic anyway. And anything that he has that can't be done somewhere else, he knows it's only a matter of time before they can do it. Yeah. This is the great opening of magic. And I was interviewing his master for astrology, and his master for astrology did his reading and accepted him like that, because he knew exactly what he would do. His prodigious memory, it's practically photographic. His practices, his honorable, he's being honorable and a good person, which is why he was also accepted by Luang Por Churui like that. That is a process that would normally take 5 years before he even accepted you. And when interviewing Ajahn Jirat, his astrology master, I said, how does time astrology compare to world astrology? And he was a bit irritated by the question, to be frank. He didn't want Thai astrology to be perceived in any other way but an astrology. And he said, all astrology is the same. Every astrologer, despite the different methods, has the knowledge available to answer any question that we answer. It's just that they've not yet worked out how to ask the question of themselves. Yeah, if they can't do it, go back to basic principles, find out. And I believe that is the case with pretty much all the magic. All the magic here can be done elsewhere if we put the work in.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Because it's a pool of magic, it's a world of magic. And this is only a place that kept it. Magic is still available everywhere else. It is the world.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you're thinking about like the view from like a Buddhist perspective, or in my mind, like a magical perspective too, because if nothingness is the origin and the basis, then there is no place and there is no time and there is no beingness as we interpret it to be. So, yeah, magic is manifest and eminently possible, but especially because if we're arising and dissolving into nothingness so fast that we can't even perceive it, that it seems like so, of course, like the magic, why wouldn't it work? Like you're just like affecting nothing to cause like a change in the nothing, And it's not as really that hard once you see it the way it, I guess you could say that it actually is, and not the way that we believe it to be.
But residing within that is phenomenally difficult.
Oh,
It's
completely difficult.
it's like when I've studied Tai Chi for 25 years. I've done all sorts of stuff like that. I don't study magic. This is, well, in the creation of it, I study the use of the magic.
Mm.
So there's two systems. But how they reside within that, I do not know, to be honest, because people go mad
Oh, well,
if you
yeah,
try
you
and
could.
attain some of these things. Yeah.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
we need people to go through the process to become the teachers
Yeah,
because everything has to be controlled by the teacher.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
And the problem is here is that many, many people try to become an Ajahn. They might be an Ajahn returned, but they might have been born on the wrong day, which makes their life incredibly difficult to become a successful Ajahn.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah? And that is then just part of their karma, you know.
yeah, I feel like at this point, I understand. My understanding is that those who have like a stable in realization, who can reside in that nothing and brightness and are that, there's no limit that I'm can perceive as to the magic that's possible. But for the rest of us, we are limited by our own obstacles, whatever they may be, I think. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, it's if we could get to that state, which obviously, like you're saying, it requires not only help, but instruction and discipline and grace and a lot of hard work. Then I feel like, yeah, it's totally possible to do incredible things, amazing
I
things.
personally feel like we're closer than you realize. Yeah. I personally think, having talked to various people, having read, you can tell a lot from reading an email. You can tell a lot from a 5 minute conversation. You can tell a lot from meeting somebody for a day to go out and go out and meet the Ajahns and have various forms of magic done.
Mm-hmm.
And I really I have the heartfelt belief that we're closer to this than we realize. And I also believe that magic will save us in the end. But what I think is the most difficult thing to understand about the Ajahns is how they sit in the actual river of magic, the weather system of magic, how they pull on the energy forms.
Mm.
Like there's ways here whereby an Ajahn every day has to do various practices to restore their energy within from the lineage system itself.
Right.
Because Ajahn Apichai says it's 50-50. He gives 50% of it of himself and brings 50% from the lineage.
Interesting.
Ajahn Dui is part of incredibly strong lineage, tiger magic lineage. And sometimes you can actually get the image of his teachers being there with him while he is pulling them forward to help bless something, you know.
That's wonderful.
So I don't know what percentage Ajahn Dewey will, but he might not even be able to work it out himself. Yeah. But as an expression of the action, I think there is a need, which is strangely allied to the need of saving the world through to avoid our extinction because of climate change. There is a need for us to become part of the world of magic itself and the stream of magic itself and nature itself. And I think particularly with the USA, there is also a need of for private supernatural locations to become available. They are there. They will be there. And we need to find the places to go and sit to be restored. Now, this can just be nature itself, because the great generation here of monks arose because of the forest monk practice of Tudong, whereby you walk in nature and you live within nature itself. And they just carry an umbrella and a bag. The umbrella becomes like a cover that goes over you at night to stop the mosquitoes. And that became the recharge for the system. And the losing of fear had a great amount of potency as well. They would also go and sleep in graveyards at a time when graveyards might just be an assembly of rotting corpses. Often they just threw the corpse in and it sat there. You know, they would use the bamboo beds that carried the corpse as a sleeping platform. You know, so I just think some sort of return to nature allied with an understanding of what is needed more, which is not might not be the same as what we want, can actually make the biggest difference of all.
Interesting. I want to ask a couple practical questions before we run out of time.
Sure.
So it's clear, I think, like there's a lot of working with ghosts, with spirits. Is there any doing magical workings or any kind of offerings that are more like deity related?
Yes, there's two types of shrine. Yeah, there's two types of altar. The pry altar, the ghost altar, faces west.
Okay.
The deity altar faces east, north, or anywhere in between. They receive different offerings. The deity altar has like 3 or 4 levels, depending on what you like. So the lowest level is for most of things like the Lursi, Rahu, all the naughtier deities, the lower deities. Above that would be a level for monks, because the Arahant monks, because they are the closest to the Buddha.
Right.
And above that would be the Buddha himself. And what is known as pratad, what are known as pratad, which are, I think they might be the same as sarira. They're the crystals that form on the remains of very high spiritual men, which are remarkable. There are many occasions, there are amulets made to the deities. There are quite a considerable amount of them as well, including all the Indian deities, except Chinnamasta, which is the one I really wanted to do but it's so mysterious that it's incredibly difficult. There are aspects of Buddhist amulets that are incredibly strange, that are also incredibly rare, that Ajahn Appichai has collected the Wicca for, which can be quite a shock. And we did one recently that helps allow you to change. Now, that can also be used from changing to this existence to death. So it's something that can be used for any process of change to ease the way forward. And I really feel that there's much more of this to come out as well. And of course, there's astrological magic, which is dealing with the planets.
Right.
You know, I mean, there's some very, very odd things with the planet deities that they can do, including rewriting difficult birth charts.
Wow.
They found they can usually Ajahn only offers to do it if it's affecting their life too much, their birth chart. They will only do it if, say, it's causing difficult health problems or destroying any chance of relationships and happiness. Then he will make an attempt to rectify that matter. There's also a way, recently, I'm not offering it yet generally, we only offer it on a one-on-one basis, whereby if somebody has the propensity to be clairvoyant, Ajahn can actually increase that propensity. So it has to be there. You can't just put it there.
Right.
Because with some things you can, but not with this. It has to have an inkling of within a person's birth astrology already, but then he can make it more pronounced. But as with all forms of clairvoyance, it takes personal training as well.
Okay.
Yeah. It can increase intuition, and actually, clairvoyance and intuition is very easily mistaken. If you have very good intuition, you don't necessarily, it can be as much of a benefit, if not more so, than clairvoyance.
Interesting.
So there's also ways to boost individual planets. There are amulets to the planets. There are amulets to the elements of each planet. Then there is a hell of a lot of astrological remediation here, which again, we're just starting to explore. So I think there's more to come for the deities.
Okay.
I think there's almost like a better relationship to come, what we understand. And I just need to get the right questions to be able to get that out, because nothing is offered without the correct question.
Yeah, I know how that goes. Believe me.
He can't access it. He doesn't know to give it to you.
Right. I know. It's frustrating at times because you want to ask, you want to get the correct information or the most beneficial information, but sometimes you don't know how to ask it, or sometimes the situation just doesn't really permit it, in a way that works. But
I think really when we can, I get ideas and I'll say to Ajahn, can you do this?
yeah,
And 99.9% of the time he says yes. He said, but I've never done it, so let's test it. And he'll make something and test it, usually with bound to my astrology, because they can also tie amulets to a personal astrology, so they don't work for anybody else, but they work twice as well for you.
interesting.
And I think I just get the impression that the door's only open this far half of the time.
Now you
But
talked
when
to
the questions come, we will know. If they come, I believe the questions are either coming from whatever benefits from that question, or the system itself, or the system itself wanting to support the magicians that use the system.
Right.
I don't necessarily think the questions are coming from me.
You talked a little bit about sort of this energetic recharging, but I'm wondering, do you have much insight into sort of the relationship between the subtle body and magic, and how that is
A subtle body. What do you mean by that?
like 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 inner yoga practices, I guess you would call them,
I
to
think it's
sort
all
of
relevant.
to sort of like increase. I think in some systems it's referred to as like Kundalini.
I think it's all relevant,
Yeah.
but it just comes from a different standpoint. I think
Okay.
any training, even artistic training, musical training, sport,
Yeah.
frees the mind. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
I think all of these things actually enable people to accept and understand magic quite quickly.
Mm.
Yeah. I think we do ourselves a disservice sometimes, Greg. I think we are already doing things generally that we don't know how they're going to be of assistance to us.
Hmm.
Like, I look back at the kind of the training I had without knowing it was training ready to do this.
Yeah.
And it all leads to this point, as
Right.
life should do. Yeah.
Hmm.
My partner, Bon, we're interviewing people who speak Old Lana. It's a different language, yeah, in the north, a different accent, different cultural references. And all this is important in translating Thai or Lana in this case, because the reason it can't be translated well by Google is that Google is not aware of the thousands of years of history here or the relation between words.
Hmm.
And oddly, Bond finds it remarkable that when he was a kid, his mum and dad had a shoe factory in Bangkok. He's a Bangkok lad. But all the workers there come from a village about 25, 30 miles away from here.
Hmm.
So he grew up with Lana people in Bangkok.
Hmm.
So coming up here, when we go to interview, and the Ajahns always love Bon instantly because they know what he is and who he is. They
Hmm.
can sense immediately what they're dealing with. And he understands every connection. So when we're translating it, it will be a case of, okay, he's saying this, which means this, but these words also mean this. And this aspect is related to that.
Hmm. Hmm.
Now, so it's like we've both been prepared to do this as a help to the Ajahns themselves, and as a help to sustain the system of magic almost,
Hmm.
with no knowledge of doing it, no knowledge of heading in this direction, but that is how it's kind of, that's why we're here.
Right. That's
That's why we've
beautiful.
ended up here. Yeah. And my belief is that we have now perhaps done enough until the next generation of people come along that can look at it all again due to the fact that everything is going to change. And magic here is only a reflection of what people ask of it.
Yeah.
It's a reflection of the culture, what the culture needs at any time.
Hmm.
So everything is in flux. And I think we're both just part of that flux, Greg, to be honest.
It's fascinating and kind of beautiful. I'm really glad that you're a part of it. And
Oh, me too. It's been revelatory. And, there's been hurdles because this is gray area stuff. This exists in the realms between legality and illegality. And that's my next job to work out how to survive that aspect. Because all my life has benefited from my astrology showing that I work best in the gray area.
yeah, I mean,
And
that
sorry,
I can feel that for sure. It makes perfect sense. We're
and we
really,
have to find a way next of um, working out how to present this in a morally acceptable fashion, not necessarily changing the magic, just making it a morally acceptable aspect of the magic.
yeah,
Morally acceptable magic. We have to work out how to describe it properly without people running around screaming, pulling the hair out.
yeah. That would be best. I think.
And it's changing so quickly, the politics around this and the society itself, that is what I am working on when we finish this conversation. I started working on it this morning.
I mean, yeah. I don't know. I feel like a couple of things, and I don't know that they are congruent, but I definitely like I feel like we're super fortunate that you do what you do and are able to convey this knowledge to us because things can be like kept secret to death, right?
Yeah,
Which
yeah.
that doesn't work.
Doesn't serve anybody.
Yeah, not at all. And then at the same time, I understand that like I don't want anyone harmed or persecuted because of their magical practices either. And
This is why middle way has to be. Thai Buddhism is a middle way.
yeah,
All magic here is the middle way.
yeah,
So when people say, "Is there, what's the black magic like there?" Well, there is no black magic here. It's all grey,
yeah.
a bit like my hair. Yeah? Um, Even Buddhist magic, which usually traditional Buddhist magic has no ghost within it.
Mm,
Even that's grey because the Buddha forbade magic itself.
yeah,
Yeah? So um, the Thais themselves don't want to produce black magic
yeah,
because it can harm them or harm their karma.
yeah. I completely understand. I feel like the disconnect occurs between cultures where you have like it's not black magic, but anything seen that uses human remains is can be seen as that, even if it's not that, in such a way that it becomes like so distorted, and it's very
I think it's
sad.
romantic, to be honest.
Maybe a little bit of that too.
It's a romantic vision of magic that, especially the people who buy it, yeah,
Yeah,
they have a romanticism about it actually being dark and mysterious magic. All magic is mysterious.
that's true.
All magic is supernatural.
Yeah,
And the more mystery that comes with any magic, the better it is.
a hundred
But
percent.
we have to get, first of all, ourselves get over the fact that sources of power are not all PC.
Right.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
All the ancient forms of magic, the PGM, the Hecate, every single aspect of it used human materials. And I get an email every week about it from somebody from different systems. Yeah. So it is just nature. And here, families will actually donate remains to
Mm.
an ajahn to earn merit
Mm-hmm.
for their loved one's spirit to get them out of hell. Yeah, there's a little bit of another story is recently Ajahn Nanding, who's a legend in this area, he's been truly appreciated since we started doing these books as well. He's had 31 masters. He's only allowed one more or it could kill him. He has done some terrible forms of magic, and now he only works with whiter magic, Buddhist magic. And when he made the change, he had to remove the heavy pry, the heavy materials from his samnak, his workplace. First of all, he offered me the remains of the monks he had studied under and the remains of Paul Saladan, who is the legend of Lana magic, Lana magicians. He was just marvelous, Paul Saladan. And because he knew I would offer them in a good way, and I would also understand the true nature of the cost of these, the price to be paid, both monetarily and otherwise. Yeah.
Yeah.
So got seen, he sent a bag, he gave a bag to Ajahn Dewey, he looks it, and I looked at this bag and I said, well, that's $1,000. I said, is that okay, Ajahn? He said, the equivalent of, fuck yeah. what he sent was double the amount. So I doubled the payment. And everything he earned from he only kept one tiny piece of bone for his connection to Paul Saladin. And everything I gave him went to the monk that was training him for his new form of magic as merit for Paul Saladin, for the Krubas, for Ajahn Narong. All the different forms of prayer was made to send merit to their spirits.
Yeah.
And these people, like all magicians here, say whether their remains can be used or not. So they actively have an understanding of how important these things are. And he also provided me with an old corpse of a baby. Now, this is a terrible story. Nong Bing, her name was Bing. Nong Bing died about 15 years ago, and she was murdered by her mum, who had terrible postnatal depression. And she had such terrible karma that that Kruba Inta decided to take care of the body and would come by and do rituals for her corpse, which was kept in the graveyard, separate, is never burned, to give it merit. When Kruba Inta passed, the job for that was given to Kruba Pointed. And by the time it came to us, this was like an angelic, what's called a Lukrok. And I paid quite a lot of merit for it to be given as merit. And we used her. And once we had used her, we used the bits that we wanted to cut. Ajahn said she wants to go. She wants to lose this physical form. So we cremated her in Ajah's back garden with the correct process of undertaking and Buddhist chanting. The feeling from that itself, the release from that, was one of the happiest feelings I've ever had. And passing her remains on, everybody has fallen in love with her. So now there's people around the world who are passing merit to an angelic child, because when her image comes to your mind, she's a happy little child in white. So those remains being given by the family to be cared for by a monk, that then went through two very important monks of high ability, came to us, and then went out in the world to create further merit for her, even though she is an angelic already. And that's kind of the most beneficial thing that could happen under those circumstances of karma. And the process of going through that was one of the most beautiful things I've ever witnessed. And Ajahn Apichai, who did all that, says the same thing. So even though tragedy can come, the Thais will try to turn that into something more beneficial.
Yeah, I don't really actually want to say anything after that, to be honest with you.
I think it's the best, there's another legendary magician here called Ajahn Best who died. He foresaw his own death at like 22 and died on the day he said he was going to do, via car accident where nobody else was even hurt. Relatives of Ajahn Apichai actually gave their child's remains to Ajahn Best to use as well. And that's only 12 years ago. It still occurs to this day. There's a Luke Rock in the temple that I know where the child, it was a stillbirth, and they gave the stillbirth child to be taken care of by the temple.
Mm-hmm.
It's still there. And they go and pray to the child for benefit and for merit. It is just another way of dealing with some of the tragedies that come to life.
Yeah.
And for some people, keeping the effect of that tragedy to become more beneficial within their ancestral lineage.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's been another case here where recently, fascinating story of two twins called Jack and Jill. And they collect old items from the culture, which recently included quite a lot of faces that have been cut off the traditional masters for Thai dance, Ramakian, Thai traditional dancing.
Mm.
And they basically got them because they weren't being cared for correctly. And now they have all been preserved properly. Some of these are over 100 years old. And they make them available for the masters and the traditional Thai dancers who need advice from the lineage of masters of Thai dance.
Mm.
I find it just breathtakingly beautiful.
It is.
Despite it being raw. The beauty of it, having witnessed some of it, the beauty of it is profound.